I'm going to give a sort of broad brush synthesis of my experiences over the last couple of years from my executive coaching practices. I only function in the professional service firm space. I mainly coach managing partners, but also I facilitate peer groups as well. So this is a blend of both. A peer group is 7 to 8 managing partners in a space, some of which groups that have journeyed together for 7 or 8 years together. So over the last couple of years, when I've looked at how managing partners have used those two propositions, they've used executive coaching more along the lines of dealing with private existential issues around having a thinking partner, being challenged in a sort of Socratic way around some of the things that are going on in their lives, but also in their leadership roles. The peer group's been very interesting watching that play out, because the peer groups actually became thinking groups, which became learning groups. It was managing partners exploring with other managing partners how managing partners were dealing with the same issues. And out of that sort of emerged this mutual support and the idea of some form of wisdom. There was a proverb out of, in the multitude of counselors, there is wisdom. And so that very much played out in all the peer groups over the last couple of years. Some of the things that emerged, first of all, on the private space was a lot around, you'll remember a book called The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, very much played out in the managing partner roles, and managing partners, in fact, it was summarized by one who's saying, a year in, feels like I've run a marathon, I arrive at the finishing place, only to see a sign that says, now you've got to run another marathon. So lots of exploration of how, around resilience for themselves, but also resilience for their firms. And the idea that you cannot lead others unless you can lead yourself. And lots of exploration of issues about, well, how do you take care of yourself? Because you are very important to your organizations. The other theme that emerged was just repeating what everybody else has said, this idea of the urgency of the now taking over, which morphed into a strange sort of strategy conversation about, instead of looking at strategy, we looked at, well, how do I think about all operational alignment priorities going through the pandemic? What are the priorities? We can't do everything. We're in danger of burning out. The third theme was this interesting conversation about power dynamics, the shift in power. Some of the language that emerged was the quasi-unionization of professional service firms staff, which gave them an increasing voice in what was going on. This was, of course, on the back of the pandemic, but also the rights given to staff as a result of the pandemic, which was mixed with societal voices increasingly coming into firms calling for increased fairness and inclusion. And those conversations morphed into this conversation about how do I build trust-based organizations? The problem with trust is a problem of trust in our political leaders, trust in society. A lot of the trust-based institutions were breaking down. And so conversations coming into professional service firm leadership about, okay, so how do I build a firm based on trust when I think that staff that come to work for me are entrusting their future to me, clients are entrusting their problems to me. So lots of conversations about that. As you'd imagine, there was conversations about future of work, summarized in the statement, work is now a space, not a place. This came as a result of almost a universal existential appraisal that was prompted by the pandemic. Everybody was asking the big existential themes of meaning, purpose, identity, relatedness, isolation, all these. I ran an existential coaching practice, so I ended up doing a lot of work in this space. This led to what they call the Great Resignation, which was certainly in America, something between 20 and 30 million people deciding to reappraise their lives and do something different, and watching how organizations responded to this, because this is the creme de la creme of the professionals that were doing this, and watching how firms were responding to that, including the ideas of firms doing co-incubation with employees that were thinking about that. Lastly, the big surprise was around IT strategy. So the pandemic was slightly amusing, because in the pandemic, it forced everybody home, including the hackers. So the hackers, out they come, and I've had a number of cases of the gut-wrenching experience of journeying with a managing partner who'd been the subject of a ransomware, not one, not two, a number. So this was very interesting, because then it started to explore the idea of, in terms of IT strategy, is my strategy right? Easy questions around cybersecurity, which morphed into it's impossible to avoid hacking. So how do I become less hackable than my competitors, on the basis that hackers, in summary, are actually pretty lazy people? And I had one very amusing conversation between a managing partner and one of these ransomware hackers, who said he couldn't get hold of the hacker. So he said, sorry, I've been very busy. So I can get back to you tomorrow on the issue, which, sorry, is not funny, but it's just a sort of an insight. Lastly, was around the whole theme of relational proximity, where we've had the digitalization of interaction, which has produced a measure of relational proximity in our firms, but unfortunately, probably only an inch thick. So this area we spent a lot of time on this, and also a lot of managing partners saying, if you take any of the other functions within my firms, I have a very good view on how to do strategy around HR, strategy around marketing, finance. But actually, when I think about IT strategy, I don't even know what the big questions are to ask. So those are the themes that I saw emerge. The summary is an ongoing question: what are the post-pandemic priorities? And every time that people have been considering that, watching how that's changed, has been there's a huge trouble with, what is the new normal?